Bro, I know you can only have one summon at a time, but if you get to level 100 Conjuration, I heard you can get two. Oh, okay, well, how many are you allowed to have in Morrowind? Well, hello there, friends, and welcome to my guide to the Conjuration skill in Morrowind. Conjuration encompasses summoning minions, manifesting equipment out of thin air, exerting control over others' will, just being an overlord. This is the skill that blew away Oh, you weren't supposed to disappear. Oh. This was the skill that blew away 7-year-old best opinion haver when Morrowind first came out, and I hope I can convince you guys of how cool it is too. Conjuration is a magic skill, and its governing attribute is intelligence. It is a favorite skill of the Tribunal Temple, the Imperial Cult, and House Telvanni. Bretons get a plus 10 bonus to Conjuration on character creation, while High Elves get a plus 5 bonus. Conjuration experience is gained just like every spellcasting skill. I recommend just making a Summon Ancestral Ghost spell for 1 second on self. You can just run around and spam it and increase your Conjuration as you play the game. Now before we get to all the spell effects, here's my personal thoughts on Conjuration. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I started playing Morrowind at a friend's house because he had an Xbox and I didn't. When he showed me you could summon the Ancestral Ghost, I literally became obsessed with this game. No game had ever let me summon something that was usually like an enemy in the game to fight for me, at least that I had played at that time, and it just kind of blew little Best Opinion Haver's mind. We probably spent half our playtime just messing around with that spell. We had a great time doing it. Oh my god, the heavy breathing on the Bone Walker is insane. Yeah, nowadays I still think it's cool, but it's also very apparent to me how strong of a skill it is. So let's talk about it. Now remember, to spellcraft these effects, you need to have at least one spell with one of these spell effects on it, so if you don't have that yet, just Google the spell effect plus Morrowind UESP, and on the right you can click spells, and you should be able to find where you can buy one. Alright, and welcome to my summoning chamber. Now, we're going to be talking about summoning first, then we'll get to bound equipment, and finish off with the command and turn undead spells. Just a quick note though, summons and bound items are going to work differently depending on what version of the game you're playing. I play on OpenMW, and you probably should too. It's the most common way people play Morrowind these days. So I'm not going to be talking about mechanics that only exist in vanilla, which are mostly just bugs, or some of the other modded versions. And that's going to be pretty important when we talk about summons, especially because summons AI works different in OpenMW than it does in vanilla, and it does make a big difference on how useful they are, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to be talking about the OpenMW summons AI. So summon spells have no magnitude, and you can only cast them on yourself, so the cost of the spell is then just determined by the duration of the summon. Most summons you buy from vendors last for 60 seconds. And your summons are going to try and stay next to you and protect you until either their duration expires, they're killed, or you recast the spell like this. One really nice thing about summons is that you can soul trap them into soul gems. This makes enchanting way easier, and it makes it so Conjuration and Enchant is a really nice pairing of skills. And unlike in Oblivion and Skyrim, Morrowind is a real game for grown-ups and lets you summon multiple minions at once. In fact, you can summon as many as you want. If they're the same type of minion, just make sure to create multiple instances of the spell, so if you wanted like 10 Bone Walkers, you would just make Summon Greater Bone Walker 1, Summon Greater Bone Walker 2, Summon Greater Bone Walker 3, etc, etc. And lastly, yes, you can put like a constant effect enchantment summon on an item, but if the summon dies, you're still going to have to unequip that item and re-equip it to resummon it, so just keep that in mind. It's not going to like instantly resummon if it dies, but it's still a good thing to have. I'm going to talk about some summons that are particularly good as constant effect summons too. Hello, Daedroth. Okay, so let's take a look at each summon individually, and we'll go in order of how much they cost to summon, starting with the Ancestral Ghost. If you pick Conjuration as one of your skills, you'll often start out with this guy based on your starting stats and stuff. And for the cheapest summon, he's really good. He doesn't do a ton of damage, but he's immune to normal weapons, he's immune to frost, he's immune to poison. So he's going to be great at taking a lot of enemies, like, indefinitely. He can also cast a few spells that drain fatigue, or endurance, or health. Now, the best thing about this summon is if you are the Atronach sign, which I'm not currently, but I'll just show you how you do it. You can punch him like this when you're low on magic, and then he'll cast a spell on you, and you'll have a chance of absorbing that spell and getting your magicka back, which is really nice. If you don't know, the Atronach sign just makes it so you can't get your magic. You have a lot more magicka, but you can't get it back the normal way of resting. You have to like absorb magic or go to a temple and use a shrine or use potions. So yeah, this summon is like essential for Atronach players, and it's probably the best birth sign in the game, so it's a pretty common strat that people use. You just summon your Ancestral Ghost, he'll use spells on you just like that, and then you'll get some magicka back, and then you just resummon and repeat. Got it? Alright, and next up we have the Verminous Fabricant. I could not get the console code for this guy to work, so you're just gonna have to look at this picture. This thing is super broken for its base cost, but you can only use it as an enchantment on the Maze Band. And you only get the Maze Band after some way into the Tribunal expansion, which is meant to be like super late game content. So I guess it's fine that he's broken, but yeah, this guy hits way harder than like the next 10 summons we're going to talk about, and he has an insane amount of health. You're just not going to be able to get him early on. Scamps are the weakest and most common Daedra in Morrowind. They don't really have great stats, but they are Daedra. So all Daedra are completely immune to normal weapons, and they have really good elemental resistances as well. So just keep that in mind for all the Daedra I talk about. These guys are definitely still good in the early game. They hit harder than the Ghost, and I'd definitely take it over the Ghost if you're still like a low-level Conjuration guy. So this is the Summon Least Bonewalker spell. There's a Greater Bonewalker as well, but when you summon it, it just says Bonewalker. Alright, so Bonewalkers do slightly less melee damage than the Scamps do, but they have spells that give them a niche. They can drain both strength and endurance from their enemies for 60 seconds. And sometimes they'll drain enough that they completely immobilize the enemy due to their encumbrance, and it'll always lower their melee attack if you're draining their strength, you know? If you've played Morrowind for a while, you know how annoying these guys are. I still think you might want to wait on using these guys until you get your hands on the greater version though, it's a big jump. This is Summon Skeletal Minion. Skeletal Minions cost the same as Bonewalkers. They do a bit more physical damage, but have no spell effects or anything else really noteworthy about them. But they're pretty cheap to cast, and I like casting a bunch of these at once and just running around with my skellies. They're actually pretty strong when grouped up like that. Alright, and here's the better version of the Bonewalker that we were just looking at. See, he's much larger, and he also doesn't have the annoying sound effect. Their physical damage isn't that much better, but their strength and endurance drain spells are like 3 times better, and for that reason, they're worth the extra casting cost if you can swing it. Honestly, for how little they cost to cast, they might be the best summon in the game. They'll frequently immobilize enemies with the strength drain, especially if you summon like multiple of them. So Clanfears are probably the worst of the Daedra summons, but they look so cool. They get all the benefits of being a Daedra still, like immunity to normal weapons and stuff, but they just don't have any spells. And to me, they just don't do enough more damage than Scamps to be worth the extra casting cost. I still use them sometimes though, because I think they're really cool. Alright, so the first Atronach we're going to be looking at is Flame Atronachs. They are also immune to normal weapons as well as fire damage. They also do more physical damage than any summon we've talked about thus far, and they have a powerful AoE fireball spell, so they're pretty good versus spellcasters because they have a 20% reflect chance. They're immune to fire damage, which spellcasters often use, and yeah, they're just pretty good summons. Oh yeah, and one last nice thing about Flame Atronachs is they have the highest level common souls in the game. So what that means basically is if you need to recharge your enchanted items, these are like a great summon to summon and then kill yourself with a soul trap on them and recharge your enchanted stuff that way. So next up we have Summon Bone Lord, and Bone Lords can be thought of as like super ancestral ghost. They've got like 4 times the health of an ancestral ghost, they've got a shield spell, they do way more melee damage, and since they're so tanky and still relatively cheap, they make a pretty good option for constant effect enchantment summons. So remember I was saying you could put a constant effect summon on a piece of equipment and then whenever it dies you just re-equip it to bring it back. I think this is probably your best bet for that kind of thing. Plus I just think they look metal as fuck and I like having one around me at all times. Alright, and Centurion Spheres were another one I was having a hard time getting the code to work to show you guys off in-game, but here's what they look like. They're just worse than Bone Lords and cost the same, so yeah, just don't really use these unless you have like a Dwemer roleplay thing going on, I guess. Frost Atronachs are like Flame Atronachs. They have pretty good melee damage, slightly better than Flame, and they have a big AoE spell. Theirs is Frost, obviously. Don't use them versus enemies with fire damage or they'll get blown up. And yeah, I think they look really cool, and I like using them in like my mid-game Conjuration characters for sure. Alright, so this is a Dremora. If you know what a Golden Saint is, you can think of these as cheaper Golden Saints. They just have great melee damage and a shield spell, and they're resistant to all the usual Daedra things. Now these guys are a good chance to talk about drops from summons. So on certain summons, if you kill them, you have like a 1 or 2 second opportunity to pick up their gear. Then they disappear. So just watch this. You'll kill them, and that reflected on me. That's unfortunate, and I'm dead. Alright, let's try that again. Okay. Alright, we got lucky. Now watch this, and it was hard to see, but here's the outline of it right here. It's just like a little blob there. And he dropped a Drow Staff and a Daedra's Heart, okay? So these Dremoras are always going to drop a Daedra's Heart, which is actually a really valuable ingredient, because there's not a lot of Restore Magicka ingredients in the game. Go ahead and take that. Now the Drow Staff is random. There's like a random pool of weapons that certain summons can spawn in with. Drow Staff's on the lower end there. You can get like, you know, Daedric weapons this way, so just keep that in mind. It's kind of broken to do, you know, like they're so expensive and you can just summon these things, get them, and sell them. So, you know, you can kind of make the game too easy for yourself for sure if you do this, as with a lot of Conjuration stuff. But if you don't care and you just want to do it and have fun, then go for it, you know. And see, there it disappeared. So there are a few summons that work that way. Golden Saints are kind of like that, and there's a few more. Just test it out yourself. I'm not going to hold your hand through everything, guys. So Hungers are really freaky looking, but they're really good. Like, they might be the best summon in the game good. They're immune to damn near everything, like even more than usual Daedra. They hit harder than Frost Atronachs, and they have a 5-second paralysis spell, which is crazy. The only downside to Hungers is that they'll sometimes spam these Disintegrate spells, like Disintegrate Armor and Disintegrate Weapon, and those aren't really that good as the other things they could be doing. So basically the meta with Hungers is to have a longer duration spell for your Hungers, you know, as long as you can manage, and they'll use those Disintegrate spells, but then they'll start doing the better stuff that they can do. I guess that would mean that these are a good candidate for your like constant effect enchantment too. So yeah, you could do that instead of the Bone Walker if you, or instead of the Bone Lord if you can swing it, but that's going to be a pretty powerful enchantment. Alright, so these next three are all from Blood Moon, and therefore you're not really going to be able to use these for the majority of the game, because Blood Moon's really high level difficult content. But we've got the Bone Wolves here. They're really strong, they have great melee damage, and they constantly regenerate health as they're out. So yeah, they're obviously a very good summon, but you're just probably not going to be able to use these for most of the game. Grizzly Bears are just like Bone Wolves, but they're even better. But yeah, you're just not going to be able to use them. And then Wolves are like the last two, but they also suck, so no need to worry about Wolves. I guess the only thing I would say about these is if you wanted to play some kind of like Nordic themed, like really Nordic themed Nord, you could console command these onto your Nord at the beginning of the game and actually use them throughout your playthrough, and that might actually be kind of fun, you know? Being like a Nord that summons Nordic themed summons while you fight with whatever style you want to fight with actually sounds like a pretty cool playthrough, and you know, I won't judge you for console commanding it. Alright, and Daedroffs are really strong. They are like proper Daedra. They can heal themselves. The only real downside to them is they have these big AoE spells they like to fire, and they will friendly fire, you know, they'll hit your other summons or they might hit you. So yeah, if you're going to use these things, I recommend just casting, you know, 1, maybe 2, and then just letting them do their thing versus your enemy while you kind of hang back, maybe fling some ranged spells if you want to help them out. Now, Storm Atronachs are the strongest Atronachs, and they are better than Daedroffs in just about every way except for casting cost for you. Not much to say on these. If you've ever fought one, you know how strong these things are. They kill really fast, and they are really hard to kill. They don't even have an elemental weakness like the other Atronachs, and I think they look super badass. The sound they make when you're standing next to them is pretty annoying, though. But yeah, you just cast one of these bad boys and let him cook, and he can take care of most enemies for you for sure. So these things are Winged Twilights. They are very, very expensive to cast, and not that much cheaper than the next summon we're going to talk about, and they're way worse than it. So I don't really recommend using these things unless you just love the way they look or something. Alright, and the most expensive summon in the game is the Golden Saint. Golden Saints have really good resistances. They do way more melee damage than any other summon we've talked about. But by far the best thing about them is that they are an engine for your enchanting. So these guys have 400 point grand souls that you can use to make some of the best enchantments in the game. The only things with better souls than these are like some of the bosses like Vivek and stuff like that. So yeah, once you can summon these, or you know, get scrolls to summon these, or an enchantment maybe, or something like that, these are very important for enchanting characters. Honestly, most characters are going to end up finding some way to get their hands on these things' souls. And yeah, I should say they are still very good summons as well. If you just want to use them as summons, they do a ton of damage. And yeah, that's all the summons in the game. There's a great variety, and I like how in this game, Conjuration summons have like a big emphasis on Daedra. I just feel like the later games focus too much on the Atronachs, and personally, I just want my summons to be demons from hell. I think that's way cooler. The Atronachs in this game are pretty cool though. Like, the Flame Atronach design isn't really for me, but I think the Frost Atronach and especially the Storm Atronach looks super sick. But yeah, I'm just more into Daedra personally, and I like how many there are in this game. I think it's a Dark Elf thing. And next up we have Bound Weapons and Armor. It's another spell that only has a duration, and it's just going to summon and automatically equip a piece of gear. It replaces whatever gear you already had in that slot initially and puts it into your inventory. And when the spell expires, it'll swap the old one back for you, which is a pretty nice touch. Thanks, Todd. So what's so good about Bound Gear? Well, you can use it at level 1 if you have a little Conjuration, and the gear has the same stats as Daedric armor. Except that they are completely weightless, which is insane. They also all have a constant effect enchantment of fortifying some skill that is relevant to the item type. So here's what it looks like when you use a bound item. I'm using Bound Helmet. Boop. Now I have a Daedric Helmet. And as you can see, it has a constant effect, fortifies all the armor type skills, so that's probably just because, you know, in case you have a variety of things, maybe you don't have armor equipped in some slot, the unarmored helps there. Maybe if you have heavy armor or medium armor, that armor is covered too, and then all bound armor is considered light armor, even though it is Daedric armor in every other way, except for weight. So yeah. Now there are a few pieces of bound gear that the devs forgot to include, or maybe just chose not to. Those are greaves, pauldrons, and crossbows. Now if you have Tamriel Rebuilt, they added the greaves and the pauldrons to the game, so just play Tamriel Rebuilt. I mean, you should anyway. Open MW and Tamriel Rebuilt, that's how you should play. Got it? And yeah, so the best way to think of bound armor is for this duration, you get Daedric armor with no weight, which is just insane. If you get hit while wearing bound armor, it's going to level your light armor stat. And so if you just want to be like a Conjuration dude that uses a lot of bound armor, you might want to have light armor as one of your major minor skills. And bound items can get damaged just like any other gear. See, it has a condition there. If it were to break, all you do is take it off and put it back on, and it goes back to full condition, so don't worry about it breaking or something. That's pretty rare to happen though in the duration that you have it. Here's a bound battle axe. A very nice thing about bound weapons is because it weighs nothing, it costs almost no fatigue to swing it, so that is very broken. If you've played a lot of Morrowind, you know how important fatigue is to like hit chance and dodge chance and pretty much everything, so that might be the best thing about the bound weapons, besides them also being freaking Daedric weapons. Also, the bound dagger is worth shouting out because it has the attack speed of a Daedric dagger, but it has the damage of a Daedric Tonto, which is like the slower but more damaging short blade option. So unless you like have one of those and put a really good enchantment on them, this is better than both of them. If you just always want some bound armor on and don't feel like enchanting them when you get into fights and stuff, you can put a constant effect bound item enchantment on your gear, but just make sure you never put it on a piece of gear that you're going to replace with that bound item effect. So if you want a bound cuirass, don't put the constant effect on the cuirass you're wearing, or else it's going to bug out your game and it might even like brick your save. So do not do that, okay? Put the bound armor effect on clothing, you know? The best option is like an amulet or rings or something. That's going to be your best bet. Or if you can somehow find clothing that can fit a constant effect bound enchantment on it, then do that too. But I wouldn't recommend putting it on armor. It's just a little risky. And yeah, so I consider bound gear pretty broken. I don't really like to use it because it makes me not excited to find new loot in the world. Like, I'm not going to get hyped that I just found a new glass sword if I can just summon a Daedric sword whenever I want from level 1. But if you don't care about, loot progression and stuff like that, and you just want to be as strong as possible right from the jump, then bound equipment is a great way to do that. And I guess the bound armor isn't as broken. It's more the bound weapons that kind of throw off the balance of the game. But yeah, they're both a little silly in my opinion. Okay, and just a couple more effects now. So first we'll look at the command spell. Command is split into command creature and command humanoid, kind of like how some of those illusion spells were in the last video. And the magnitude you set has to be higher than the level of the creature or NPC that you're using these spells on for it to work. And the duration is obviously how long the effect lasts. Then if the creature or NPC you used it on were a lower magnitude than your spell, they will just become your companion until the spell wears off. So they will fight for you, they'll follow you around, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so here's a mud crab. This should work. Okay, and now this mud crab is our companion for the next 30 seconds. He's not attacking me. We're homies now. He's very slow, so it's hard to show him following me, but he is trying to follow me. And yeah, that's what command does. And the command spell just has a ton of different uses, you can pit two tough enemies to fight each other like I did here. Well, they weren't tough, but they were enemies. One of the coolest things you can do is move important NPCs around the map. So if you have a vendor you really like to use, a repair guy, or an enchanting guy, or a spell creator, you can move them into your player house just by using command and having them follow you all the way there. And then when the spell breaks, they're not going to leave. So that's a good way to get vendors in your house. One of the coolest options is actually to bring a travel person to your house. So you can bring like a Mages Guild travel person, or a Silt Strider person, or a boat person. And it makes no sense because the Silt Strider and the boat aren't there anymore, but you can actually just use their services from your house, so that's pretty crazy. The Mage Guild's probably the best one because they'll take you, to the most important places. Another great NPC to bring to your house is this guy Creeper. If you don't know, this is a scamp that's in Saldera, and if you talk to him, he has 5,000 seller gold. And if you try to sell him something, it just sells for the actual value that it is, pretty much, because he has no mercantile skill or speechcraft or anything. So you could also do the Mud Crab Merchant, which has more money, but the Mud Crab Merchant's kind of a pain in the ass because he's so far away from everywhere. So I like to just do Creeper, move him into my house, and then I have one of the best merchants in the game just chilling with me. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool applications to the command spell. It's another one of those spells you'll only find in Morrowind, where it's so game-breaking, but just in the perfect way. This is the kind of stuff that I miss in the later Elder Scrolls titles. Alright, and the last spell we're going to be looking at today is Turn Undead. This just increases the flee value of undead enemies by the magnitude, and at a high enough flee level, they will just run away from you for the duration of the spell. It's kind of like, what was it? Demoralize from the last video that just makes NPCs or creatures flee. This is the one for Undead. This one's a little better, I think, because Undead are normally in like these small, compact dungeons where they don't really have a lot of room to run, which means it's easier to catch up to them and kill them, and they're not going to fight back. You just kind of kill them. It's also really good for marksmen, because marksmen kind of struggle in those small, compact dungeons, and this is just going to make it a lot easier for you to fight against all the undead in there. Just shoot. It's like target practice, basically, right? Alright, and that is every Conjuration spell in Morrowind. I think the main takeaway here is that Conjuration is powerful. Like, in terms of making the game easier and your player character stronger, this is definitely one of the best skills in the game. It also has a lot more utility for ranged characters than I realized, like, I only ever really used Conjuration with mages and battle mages and stuff, so it's kind of made me want to try, like, a Conjuration Wood Elf thing, marksman, Conjuration, light armor, and maybe use the bound armor. That actually sounds like a pretty fun playthrough idea. But enough yapping, let's go find the master trainer for Conjuration. Man, I sure do love Aldrune. Nothing sucks about Aldrune. Alright, so Methyl Saran can be found here on the bottom floor of the Aldrune Temple. Now, unfortunately, he only offers his services if you are a pretty high-ranking member of the Tribunal Temple faction. You actually get a lot of benefits from doing the Temple faction, like there's pretty good quest rewards and stuff, but yeah. If you're playing a Conjuration character, maybe join the temple. It is a favorite skill for them too. If not, it's not the biggest deal in the world because the spellcasting skills are, the easiest to train. You can just spam this train conjuration spell we made if you don't want to use this guy, but yep, that's where the master trainer is. And yeah, that's going to do it for the conjuration video. I hope I taught you in-laws a thing or two about conjuration. Let me know in the comments what I missed. Let me know what you think. Alright, I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!